Thanks for joining me here today. Today we're going to do a lot about colour. When many artists start out, they're not sure of how to mix colours, what colour to use. So in my experience with colour, there's really only 4 ways you can go with colour. You can either go lighter or darker, warmer or cooler, and that applies to all your colours. It applies to blues. Yep, there's warm and cool blues, there's warm and cool reds, there's warm and cool yellows. So if you know how to mix these, you don't need a lot of paints in your palette. You can paint, I've only got 14 in my palette. I've got a few extras tucked away just in case I need that extra splash of colour that I don't have in my palette or that I cannot mix quickly. So there's so many colours that you can mix from 14 colours, and very often most artists probably find that they use 6 or 7 colours to produce everything that they like to use, and that's how they get their own individual colours happening for their paintings. So I hope you're going to enjoy what we're going to do. We're going to give you lots of ideas for the future and give you an idea of where to get started and how to proceed. I'm also going to mix some warm and cool greys, and I'm going to do reds. It's very important to know how to paint a dark red, mix a dark red. For example, down in the creases, in the depths of the petals of a red rose, you would need to have a very dark red, almost black red in some roses, and then you need to be able to also mix a very light shade of that red. The same with yellow. You cannot paint, for example, a lemon unless you be able to mix warm and cool yellows. The warm yellow would be right at the front of the lemon, and the cooler yellows you would put to the back of the lemon so that it would have that 3 dimensions effect, and it would look far more realistic. The same goes for, say, painting sunflowers. You need to be able to paint warm and cool yellows. So if you can't mix them easily, you'll struggle, and your painting of a sunflower, for example, will look very flat. It won't have that effect of the petals, some petals coming forward and some going backwards. So you need to be able to mix up the temperature of your colours as well as the tone. So tone in a colour relates to how dark a tone is. So I usually use 5 tones, and most colours can be mixed from very, very dark to very, very light. The lightest colour, the lightest tone, I always leave as unpainted paper, because it's quite strange. In watercolour, the unpainted paper is brighter than any white you can apply to your paper. So we always leave some white paper. That's the lightest tone in any shade that you're painting. So all the colours that I'm going to show you how to mix today can all be mixed in tonal value range from number 5, which is very, very dark, right down to a number 1, which is the white of the paper. The hardest ones to mix in a very dark shade are yellows, because you can only go so dark in a yellow before you come to an orange, and that's about as dark as you can go with the yellow. But you can still have, light, probably about a number 4 in a yellow, but most yellows are sort of between a 2 and a 3, sometimes to a 4. So I hope you're going to enjoy today's tutorial, and please, if you've got a question, please ask, and thanks for joining me, and enjoy. Thank you. So here are my gorgeous, rich, luscious Holbein colours. So what can we do with them? How do you mix colours? Well, one way you can do it is to wet the paper first and let the paints actually mix on the paper. It's another way to do it. So if, for instance, we mix up a nice strong puddle of rose madder, put some rose madder on your paper. So put plenty of pigment and just let the paint do what it wants on the paper. And then if you want to have a warmer colour, drop some yellow in. We call that just dropping in the colour. So you can put it anywhere. So the paint will only go where the paper is wet. You can lift your paper up and you can get that to flow up or down the paper, wherever you want it to go. But usually, unless it's extremely wet, it'll just sit where the wet paper is. It won't go sort of wandering off all over the paper. Beautiful orangey rich red down there. So I'll just make that slightly stronger, the yellow. So this is Aureolin yellow, and I've got rose madder. So if I just let them dry and mix on the paper, you'll see what they look like. It'll probably take a while because that's very, very wet, but I can come back to that and show you when I finish. Another fantastic colour combination that I like to do, I'll just move my paint box a little bit, is with, you can do the same with the rose madder. And this time we'll do it on dry paper, so get that to come down the paper. Lots and lots of water, and we'll cool it down on the lower end of the wet paper with some cobalt. So you can just even squeeze out your brush and just drop the paint in. So you can see how that will make the most beautiful purples when it mixes, and you don't have to do anything to it at all. If you just leave it to mix on the paper, you'll get absolutely beautiful marks and pigments happening. Another one we can do is Cobalt Blue, and this time I'll mix the puddle up, but I'll wet the paper again. Okay, and I might just pick that one up. I'll drop the cobalt in. And then I'll put the Aureolin yellow in at the lower end again, and you can see how this will form just beautiful spring greens. You might decide to put a little bit more blue down here and make it lighter in the centre section, darker up there. This is already drying, so that's got quite a bit lighter there. Another one we can do is I can use some Prussian Blue. I'll mix that up. And I'll just do this one onto dry paper to start with. And I'll just drag that down the page just with water. So I'll use a different yellow here. I'll use Quinacridone Gold, which is a wonderful gold. It's in the palette, it looks almost like it looks almost like a brown. So if we add that to the phthalo blue, Prussian blue, we get very beautiful, a darker green, almost like an olive green, but it's got that really gold tint to it. Beautiful. You might decide to jazz this one up a bit with just some dry brush stroke down the outside of that for a bit of something different. Other colours that you can do this with, or other combinations, are if you want to have, say you were doing petals on a rose, I'll mix some Quinacridone Red. So Quinacridone Red is a very cool red. It's much cooler than rose madder. You could bring that again straight down the paper. And if you put some neutral tint with that, which is actually a black, but it's quite transparent sometimes. So if you want to darken up your pink, or if you had petals that were quite dark in the shadows or the inside of the petals, that can also look a really beautiful colour. And it goes to a purple shade almost. So that's interesting. Another one is if you use burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is a beautiful colour, especially the Holbein one. It's very clear, very strong, beautiful colour. Take that down your paper. The paper's going like that because it's hot pressed and has a very hard surface compared to some of the other papers. And if it's very dry, it will sort of, the water, it separates the water a bit. It's great for if you want to get textures happening on the paper. It's really good for that. So if you put some ultramarine into your burnt sienna, you'll get a very dark shadow colour. Great for interiors, like shadows inside a building, that sort of thing. But if we put much stronger burnt sienna here, and you can add some rose madder to that, you'll get the most beautiful outback sort of reds, and that can also drift down. Another thing I like to do with these colours is I like texture in a paintbrush stroke with lots of leaves, with anything abstracty. I like these little areas here that happen where you get texture forming, because what happens is you've got the water pushing back against the damp paint, and you'll get what we call cauliflowers, or as someone called them recently in a workshop, vegetables, because they couldn't remember what they were called, so they said, oh, I think they must be vegetables. So now they're called vegetables. So you can get the most beautiful marks like that when the shine starts to go off the paper. So they're just some different colour combinations. Other things that you can do with that is, if you have a very fine tipped brush and you wanted to, drag lines out of that, when it starts to dry, you can, it's a little bit damp still, it's not working, but you can draw water across that and you will get lines appearing across the paint with really sort of raggedy edges, which I just love. You can also just drag across. And the wet paints will all run into each other. So you can get some amazing things like that happening, especially if you like doing abstracted colours, abstracted works. Another thing you can do is just grab a pencil, and if you draw lines into that, the paint will sink into the crevices on your paper and it will form even darker lines. I also have a gadget. I make these, I just love using them. They will give you, it's called a folded nib pen, and it's not sharp, but it's very fine aluminium, and it will make beautiful grooves in your work. So if you want to do abstracted works, so you don't even have to do it hard, but wherever you do the lines, the paint will fall into that groove, and it will just give you beautiful, fine lines if you want them. Because this has got lots of paint on, you can get some wonderful effects and marks. The trouble is I've completely destroyed my tonal swatches and how I've mixed the colours, but we'll go on to the next stage now, and I'll do an in-depth colour mixing for you so that you can enjoy that. To know how to mix up very warm land like we have here in the outback in Australia, and that's the colour of our gum trees. So that's really, really important to know how to mix your warm and cool colours. This landscape here is, again, it's light and dark. We've got warm hills there. There was a sunset up at Lake Argyle near Kununurra. And to be able to mix that warm and the reflected light on the mountains, and to be able to mix the grey hills as the sun was not shining on them, is really important and very helpful for doing landscapes. So here I've got something totally different, which are some roses. So these are a rose that's called Pierre de Ronsard. They have beautiful pink tips to the petals, and I've just left most of this white unpainted. So you've got cool petals there, and it's a warm colour in there. And we've got warm and cool greys in the background, and also warm and cool greens over there. So that's something else that's very helpful to know. In the last one here, I've got a painting of hydrangeas. So, you know, a lot of people feel that it's quite difficult to see the difference between warm and cool blues. Well, I always think like the Antarctic or the Arctic, very, very cool blues here, like icebergs, whereas this is more like, you know, warm summer oceans, Mediterranean type of colours. And again, we've got very, very light blue, and we've also got very, very dark blue. So it's very helpful to be able to. And let's see what we can do with ultramarine. So if we make a nice strong puddle of ultramarine, put some on our paper, and then into my puddle I'm going to mix some Aureolin yellow, but only a tiny bit at a time. So there we go. This will be slightly warmer, but a bit cooler than the previous mix because of the Aureolin yellow. And then I'll add a little bit more, just on the tip of your brush, just a tiny bit more. And some more. And this is one type of green you can have. I don't have any green in my palette because I like to mix all my own, and that way I think it makes your painting kind of unique. It makes it your own. So as you can see, as we've gone up the page, this green is become a more of a spring green because it's got more yellow added to it. So I'll just clean that off. What happens if we add some permanent rose to that? No, let's change. Let's put some Quinacridone Red. Okay, so there's some Quinacridone Red. And we'll mix up some more, a bit richer ultramarine. So into the ultramarine we'll put a little bit of red, the Quinacridone Red, and you'll see that Quinacridone Red is such a powerful colour. All the Quinacridone colours are really strong, beautiful, clear, transparent colours. And these are all Holbein paints that I'm using. I love Holbein paint. I use and recommend them. They are wonderful to paint with. And they're one paint that I find will lift off quite easily. If you need to ever lift off paint for any reason, sometimes different brands are very, very difficult to lift off. Some of them just won't lift off at all, and they seem to stain the papers badly, whereas Holbein colours just lift off beautifully. So there we go. You can see how, as we've gone down and added more and more Quinacridone Red to each little puddle of ultramarine, it's become warmer. So I will take a photo at the end and put up the top there what I've used so that you can remember, but we could always just flip back through the video. And I think that's they're beautiful colours. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 colours out of using just 3 paints. I don't have a lot of different paints in my paint box, and as you can see I don't have a green. I prefer to mix my own greens. I probably only use half a dozen of these colours all the time, but the ones you use the most will be ultramarine, Quinacridone Red, permanent rose and cobalt. And the warmer colours, which I've all got all the yellows down one side, I included burnt sienna as a yellow. You use lots and lots of burnt sienna, especially mixed with ultramarine, fabulous dark. Okay, so for the next one, let's mix Quinacridone Red and see what we can do with that. So a nice puddle of Quinacridone Red. I'll make it a little bit more water to that. And I think I'll use Aureolin Yellow again for this one because it's such a beautiful, clear, cold yellow. So this is interesting. We've got a cold red, Quinacridone Red. It's definitely a cold red because it's on the blue side of warm. It's not a scarlet colour by any means. Now we're going to mix a cold yellow to that and watch what happens. It's quite interesting. So I've only added a little bit of the Aureolin yellow and you can see straight away this has gone to a light scarlet. So if I add more to that, same batch, it's become lighter in colour because it's got more yellow with it, but it's also become a lot warmer. And then we'll go again with more yellow. And then I'll put even more yellow into that. A little bit more yellow. Okay. So you can see there that they've become warmer and warmer as they've gone up, but these colours here are just beautiful. So if you wanted to paint, for example, nasturtiums or anything like that, you could use all those colours to paint nasturtiums, and I'm sure you'd be very, very happy with your result. Now, what happens if we mix? We can mix phthalo blue. Let's try phthalo blue with the Quinacridone Red. Let's have a go. Just clean that out again. So Prussian Blue, powerful, powerful colour. You don't need much Prussian Blue. And again, we've got the Quinacridone Red. So we'll try a little bit of Prussian Blue into the Quinacridone Red. And you get a purple again, but you can see how it's a different purple to the other side. I'll put some more in. So if you're painting roses or wisteria, purple shadows, you might want to use quite a blue purple, a bluish purple. Now we're getting a little bit more like the purples on the other side, and then in the end we'll have almost no Quinacridone Red in this, and you'll end up with more of a bluish colour. So you can see how you've got, again, so we've only introduced one more colour. So we've got Aureolin Yellow, Ultramarine, Quinacridone Red, and the fourth colour is the Prussian Blue. So out of that we've got 16 colours. So that is just wonderful. You don't need a huge range of paints, but if you can learn to mix your own colours, you will be so happy because you can use them anywhere to make any colours you want. Okay, so I'm going to use Cobalt this time because we haven't used the Cobalt Blue. So I'll mix up some Cobalt. Okay. And you can see here that Cobalt is a cooler colour it's a cooler blue than my Ultramarine. So let's add some Quinacridone Gold to that. Okay. So again, because Quinacridone Gold is such a powerful colour, synthetic colour, you only have to use a tiny bit of it to change the colour. So already that's gone to more of a turquoisey colour. So if I add a bit more Quinacridone Gold, it will go warmer, and if I add some more, it will go warmer still, and might even need a little bit more. I've run out. The last one will be a lovely, quite a rich green, beautiful leaf green colour. So I think that's really nice colour. I like that green. So you can see we've gone up again, and just using the two colours, we've got all those beautiful greens from there. So what can we do to warm up that green? Well, you could, to warm up the blue, we've warmed it up there with a yellow. So we need to cool it down. So what can we do to cool that down? Well, if I use a different yellow, we'll use, for example, the Aureolin yellow, I should get a much cooler spring green. Okay, so Cobalt, a nice puddle mixed up there, and we need some Aureolin yellow, so put a bit of yellow there and a nice lot of Cobalt. Okay, let's try this. So straight away that has gone, I'm going to put a bit more Cobalt in that because it's gone too green too quickly, so I had more yellow than I have blue. So very similar to that green there. So let's put some more yellow into that. There we go, and I'll just put a bit more yellow into that because I've run out. Okay, so you can see how the Quinacridone Gold with Cobalt Blue is quite different to the Aureolin yellow and the Cobalt. So there again we've got 8 beautiful shades of green, and we've got another 4 over here just out of using 3 colours. So it's really fascinating being able to mix your own colours. Now the next one I want to show you is we want to do some ultramarine and yellow ochre. So yellow ochre is this one here. You can use, yellow ochre is very similar to raw sienna. It's a little bit more opaque, but it's also a great colour. So I'll just clean out these little wells in my mixing tray. Always have your palette nice and clean if you're mixing colours. You can get away with it if you're doing a painting, especially if you're using a limited palette, but if you want to experiment with your colours and get really nice, clean, fresh colours, please keep your mixing wells clean. Okay, so I'm going to start up the top with ultramarine. So this is just purely colour mixing, so ultramarine, okay. Make that square a little bit bigger because it's my master mix. And then I'm going to put in some yellow ochre. So a little bit of yellow ochre. Now the interesting thing is, up until now we've used very transparent colours. Yellow ochre is not a transparent colour. It's already It's opaque, and it's kind of what I'd call at least a secondary colour, because it's got other colours mixed with it to make it like the colour that it is, the yellow ochre. So this greeny blue here is just a gorgeous colour. If you're doing very soft trees in the distance, if you're doing dense foliage, it's just beautiful. So into that I'll mix a little bit more yellow ochre on outside the line there, and that's sort of quite a grade green. And here's one, I'll just put a little bit more into that. Okay, and here's another one. It's even a warmer sort of green. It's gone that way quite quickly. So you can see, again, there's some beautiful colours that you've mixed on the paper. And when you leave them to dry, if you mix them on the paper, you'll get very fresh, clear colours. Don't keep going, once you've mixed them, leave them to dry. If you want to make it darker or lighter or introduce another colour, if the paper is shiny wet, you can, but if it isn't, leave it to dry. Because watercolour is all about being right, having just the right amount of pigment with the right amount of water at just the right time. Now, what else would I like to show you? I'd like to show you how to make a dark red. Now, I do lots of roses. Haven't actually painted a dark red rose for a long time, but if you need to, this is how you can get a beautiful dark red. So mix up some neutral tint, which is just a fancy name for the black, which is semi-transparent and semi-opaque. And mix up some Quinacridone Red. Okay, so I'm going to put a lot of the black, the neutral tint. Okay, and we're going to do a tonal value swatch, a tonal study from 1 to 5. I'm going to put even some more dark into that because I want it to be quite a dark red. So I don't know if you can see that, but there is a bit of light in that. It will dry lighter. Okay, so then the next tone down, tonal value studies, you can do them from 1 to 10, but usually 1 to 5 is plenty. You can always sort of go halfway in between. So there you go. You can see that is quite a bit lighter. I think it looks lighter in reality than it does on the screen. So that could have a bit more dark in it, just to make it the same colour. That one is lighter again. So that's your middle colour. And often it's this number 2 tone that's the hardest to get, because in watercolour we leave the lightest one as unpainted paper. So this square has to be halfway between that one and white paper, so barely anything there. So I will draw a square on the paper that will remain just white unpainted paper. I did have an eraser here somewhere, but I've lost it. There we go. So that would be unpainted paper, so you wouldn't paint on that. So that can be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And any of these colours you can do like this as a tonal value study. The only colour that you can't go truly dark in is a yellow, because if you go really dark with a yellow, it just doesn't work, because yellow is only so dark. If you put black or other colours with it, it will go into very different shades. Now some other colours that we can mix are, I'll just get an eraser, I can see one over here. Okay, I'll just get rid of some of those lines. Okay, so just some interesting colours that you might want to have a go at mixing are, a lot of people like to have cerulean in their paint box. I don't worry because I can actually mix my own. And I don't have a viridian because I can mix my own. So if I clean out my paint box, which I have, Prussian Blue, very handy colour, Prussian Blue. So make it a little bit lighter there. Now if I put, again, the Aureolin yellow into that, a little bit darker, there we have a viridian. So that's just those two colours. I've just gone over a line there that I don't want to. Won't come off. There we go. That's a viridian. Gorgeous colour. A cool bluey green. Cool bluey green. So what happens if I mix that with white? Well, let's have a go. So if you mix white with that, you get the most exquisite jade colour. It's opaque because it's got white, but isn't that just a delightful colour? I love that colour. I'm not actually a fan of green. I don't really like green in the landscape. I think there's more exciting colours to use. I suppose it's because I'm used to Australian blue greys in the bush rather than greens. You go to Europe and find it quite difficult to paint because you're used to painting. Our greens are not European greens, and I think some European people probably find it quite difficult coming here to paint our greens. So if I use Prussian Blue and just white without yellow in, you can get cerulean. So there we go, that's cerulean. So you don't have to go out and buy heaps of different paints when you're first starting out, because you can mix your own paints, mix your own colours, and you'll have far more success in individual paintings if you can mix your own and have your own colour palettes that nobody else uses. So I think that's always very, very helpful. The other thing that is really helpful to know is mixing greys. A lot of people find mixing a grey very difficult. Well, most, if you don't ever clean your palette out and every colour is mixed up together, it will form a grey. But generally you've cleaned your palette out and you need to just mix a grey. So how do you get grey? If you mix any three primary colours in equal parts, you will get grey. For example, if we mix ultramarine, bit of Quinacridone Red, you get purple. So what happens with the purple? Well, if you mix an opposite colour, complementary colour, it will grey that purple out. It might need just a little bit more blue to make it a very neutral grey. So you can see there in the palette how that is now a lovely grey, and it's kind of an interesting grey. It's a purple grey, I think. A purple grey. I hope you can see that clearly. So if you wanted a grey that was more blue, a blue grey, now these are fantastic in far distant gum trees, horizons, distant hills, all that sort of thing. That's more of a blue grey. And you could even go more blue than that if you wanted. So way in the far distance, you'd have these lovely blues. And if I make that paler, you can see that will dry as just the most beautiful, soft blue grey. I think that's really all I need to show you. Oh, I've done the dark red. We can just do a tonal value scale here. So a really good way to get a tonal value scale is ultramarine. I'll just mix this up here. Ultramarine, you don't actually need black. I painted for 20 years without it, but it's handy to have. But if you want a really good dark, mix up your ultramarine with burnt sienna. So if it's got lots of ultramarine in it, it will go almost black and go to a neutral grey. If it's got too much burnt sienna, you'll end up with a brown. So here we go. Here's my darkest, my super dark colour. So to make that lighter, simply add some water. And then add a bit more water. And then just add more water again. So this one has to be like that one, quite pale, so I need quite a lot of water there. And then the last one, of course, is just left as unpainted paper. That's my number one. So I'll just put a cross there because we're not going to paint that. So if you can do that with your tonal value swatch, you'll find that you can mix just the right tones for your paintings. It's hot press paper, and I don't have it taped down, and it's not damp on the back, so it's buckling. So I just need to, if you get too much paint, just put the bristles of your brush, especially if you've got a natural bristle brush. Good luck painting with a synthetic brush, it just doesn't work. And I'll take a bit of, so if you just touch the tip of your bristles to the bubble of water, it'll soak it up and you'll end up lifting the water but not the pigment. Okay, so there we are. We've got all those gorgeous colours. So how many colours have I used? Well, I've used burnt sienna and ultramarine, that's 2. I've used the same colours there. This one's got ultramarine and yellow ochre. I've used Prussian Blue here, Quinacridone Red there, Cobalt here, and Aureolin. So I've only used 9 colours, and I've got all of those beautiful colours. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks very much for watching. Any questions, please ask. I'll leave a list of all the colours that I've used under the video for you to look at when you're ready. And thanks for joining me, and I'll be making more videos soon. Thank you.